To take a loan and spend it on something you need or to solve a problem you have with its help, what could be easier? Only maybe a freebie, but you can't find a freebie these days with Fire, but you can get a loan on every corner. Just imagine, today almost any of us can get real money, for any purpose at all, true, at different interest rates, but nevertheless. And it's not about the interest rates, it's about the opportunities that open up for modern people, thanks to loans, because if you have money, you can afford a lot, you can solve many of your problems with their help. And people take loans, quite actively, for a variety of purposes and at different interest rates. They use the opportunity given to them, some with more, some with less success. A loan is generally a tool, and you need to know how to use any tool. Those who know how to use it live well, and those who do not, face financial difficulties. For some, a loan is a great blessing, and for others, a terrible evil, that's how it is. Smart people have long used credit as a very useful and very effective tool with which they make their lives better. But people, let's say, not very smart, of course, also take loans, but at the same time they face big problems because of them, when they cannot repay these very loans. Hence the ambiguous attitude towards loans for both. It's just that many people look at credit as almost free money, with which you can buy yourself whatever you want, and they do not think at all about their responsibility to the banks. But this is not a freebie, no matter how you look at it. Credit is a tool that you need to know how to use. I tirelessly continue to repeat this. The bank does not give money to anyone, it lends it. And debts must be repaid. If a person takes out a loan because he simply wants to buy himself a new thing, and not because he has calculated and assessed everything correctly in order to get a real benefit from the loan, then it is not surprising that for such people the loan becomes a headache when it is time to pay it back. After all, it is one thing when we plan something and then act, and quite another when we stupidly react to certain external stimuli and make our decisions spontaneously. Often, problems in our lives arise from the fact that we make certain decisions based on emotions, without thinking at all about what and why we are doing. You need to use a loan carefully, clearly understanding for what purposes you are taking it, and to what extent these purposes are justified. And it is absolutely necessary to know in advance how you will repay it. Do not forget the old wisdom that says, you borrow someone else's money for a while, but you repay your own forever, and do not perceive a loan as a panacea for all problems, or as a magic wand that can fulfill any of your wishes. Everything in this world has its price, remember this, and loans have one too. Well, let's see why people take loans, for what purposes. Reasons why people take out loans. 1. Desire to live a beautiful life. The desire for wealth and luxury is inherent in most people, and since this very majority is accustomed to easy solutions to their problems and tasks, then credit, due to its availability, is an excellent opportunity to make their lives better for most people. Indeed, why try to work, why sweat until you sweat, why constantly study and improve your skills in order to become an indispensable and therefore highly paid specialist, if you can just go to the bank and take money for one purpose or another? Simple, accessible, fast, that's what attracts people to loans. And therefore, even being a simple plumber, you can afford to buy, for example, the same car, and not just any car, but a good, expensive, prestigious one, sitting behind the wheel of which you can feel like someone significant and important. Almost every person wants to be no worse than others, and even better, to stand out from the crowd. They want to live a royal life, and in general, most people in this world want everything at once. It is clear that no loan can satisfy such a desire to have everything at once, but it can still satisfy some of a person's needs and desires. And what do many people want when they think and talk about the beautiful life? They want to have a car, a nice apartment, expensive furniture, fur coats and all sorts of jewelry, if we are talking about women. They also want to have all these cool phones, laptops, and similar things. In general, a standard set of beautiful and expensive things, that's what people need. Of course, most of these things are not needed by people at all, but for them it's all just a show-off, you know, a show-off, a show-off, a show-off. I know, or rather, I knew people who live only for the sake of showing off and do not spare any money for this show-off. They are ready to take out a loan to buy a new phone model, to get it when this phone goes on sale, because it is cool. Well, if a person wants to work for illusions, let him work. Let him take out a loan, show off, and then pay back this loan for several months or years, if that is what he wants. If you think about it, it is, of course, stupid to use something expensive and at the same time not particularly necessary, just because it is, like, cool, and because it is fashionable. But people want to be who they are not, and expensive things allow them to do this. Expensive watches, expensive cars, expensive food and clothes, all this is needed mainly by those people who want to seem rich, who need admiration and recognition from others. In addition, many people want to use quality things, although they do not know how to determine this quality. Therefore, they focus exclusively on price. The word expensive itself already means good quality for most people, so their brain automatically classifies an expensive product as good, and a cheap one, accordingly, as bad. But this is, damn it, not so, or rather, not always, and not entirely so. In our time, many things are not worth their money, much is now drawn from the same barrel and sold under different labels at different prices. And people overpay money, essentially, for a label, for non-existent quality, for absolutely unnecessary show-offs and, ultimately, for air. Well, if someone is ready to take out a loan for air, good riddance to him. On the other hand, no one is saying that something really good must necessarily be cheap. Of course a quality product will be expensive, or at least not cheap. But this good thing, you still have to choose from everything that is supposedly good. It is clear that a Mercedes or a BMW is much better than some Lada, and the price of these cars of different quality, accordingly, will also be different. A good car will cost more than a bad one. We understand this. We accept it. Therefore, if a person wants to buy a good car, he will have to buy it on credit, because his salary, in most cases, will not allow him to buy a car right away, with the money he has. This is not like buying Chinese slippers. And saving up for a car takes too long, and inflation eats up all savings very quickly, so there is nothing left for a person except a loan. In general, you can and should pay for quality, and taking out a loan to buy a good and necessary thing is certainly worth it, but it should be a really good and necessary thing. 2. An urgent need for money. Sometimes people really urgently need money. It can be a question of life and death. And if this money is not found, then that's it, the person will perish. Such an urgent need for money, of course, does not often arise in the life of a normal, prudent and responsible person who thinks about many things in advance. However, you yourself understand that anything can happen in the life of any person, and it is simply unrealistic to prepare for everything. You can't lay down straw everywhere where you can fall, because you can fall anywhere. What kind of situations can arise in our lives, because of which we urgently need money? It is quite obvious that anyone, even the healthiest person, can suddenly fall ill or get injured, or just get into trouble. This also happens, and as a result, a person will have a very real and quite acute need for money. Not everyone and not always is ready to give us money on credit, but almost anyone can get a loan at any time, even when he has no job and a positive credit history, as long as he has his passport with him. Not everyone, not always, and not everyone is given a loan, this is clear, but they give it, that's what is important. In other words, anyone can borrow money at interest today, another matter is what the interest will be. But if you have a very serious problem in life that urgently needs to be solved, then, in fact, what difference does it make what interest rate someone is willing to lend you, as long as they lend it? Right? After all, a person shouldn't die if he needs, say, the same operation. It is much better and much more correct in such a case to take out a loan and prolong his life, which cannot be more expensive than anything else. Some people say that in our time it is cheaper to die than to be treated. They say that quality treatment is very expensive and not everyone can afford it. Yes, not everyone, but as you wish. Every person wants to sell their labor as expensive as possible, because everyone wants to earn well in order to live well. Therefore, we have no right to blame anyone for the high prices for their services. It is better to take out a loan and pay for your own health and your own life. Expensive medicine is not a reason to refuse it. It is rather a reason to monitor your health and at least not to harm yourself with all sorts of bad habits, so as not to pay doctors for your own stupidity later. In general, when you need money urgently, when it's a matter of life and death, then not only a loan, but any means of getting money can and should be considered in all seriousness. You don't need to make a choice in favor of less when it's a matter of money and your health, and especially your life. You can refuse any gold, any wealth, for the sake of your own health and your own life. And a loan, even at the highest interest rate, is not the highest price for your life. The highest price is life itself. So if it's a matter of life and death, first of all, your life, then take a loan without thinking. Don't save on yourself, it's just stupid. 3. A loan for purchasing real estate. Improving your life by purchasing real estate, usually an apartment or a house, is a sacred thing, friends. How many people live in inhumane conditions today? How many people do not have children due to lack of housing? How many young families are forced to huddle in cramped apartments with their parents, without the opportunity to live a full independent life? Well, why the hell do you need all this, one wonders. Isn't it better to take out a mortgage and live in a normal, spacious apartment, where you can have children and live in peace and quiet, without sharing anything with anyone? A mortgage loan is considered to be a very controversial loan in its necessity and profitability, because no one wants to become a bank debtor. Moreover, some people suggest renting a home instead of buying it on credit, so as not to be tied to one place and not to be in bondage to the bank. That is true, but firstly, in this world we always owe something to someone. They will not leave us alone until all the juices are squeezed out of us, if not through loans, then through taxes, if not through taxes, then through high prices for socially significant goods, and at the same time through lousy bureaucracy and outright blackmail in the form of corruption. You will not be able to be completely independent from society. And banks, in fact, are no better or worse than other institutions that oblige us to do something. The same state will always fleece us 3 times, serving the interests of the elite, which, as Machiavelli wrote, is never satisfied with anything. Therefore, having a normal apartment is much better than living in cramped conditions, and even with small children, as happens with many young families. And it is definitely better than living in the same communal apartment with all sorts of drunken cattle, drug addicts, morons, and scumbags, who cause a lot of problems. Well, why do you need all this? Think for yourself. It is better to depend on a bank, which the worst thing it can do is take your apartment away, than to exist in inhuman conditions, like some kind of worm. Of course, you can rent the same apartment or the same house, and then you won't have to pay the initial payment to the bank and you won't have to be tied to one place. You can go wherever you want at any time. However, simple logic indicates that it is still more profitable for a person to pay money to the bank so that ultimately the apartment he bought with a mortgage becomes his property, than to rent the same apartment from not always adequate landlords and expect all sorts of surprises from them. After all, they can throw a person out on the street at any time, despite the rental agreement, or raise the price, or change the locks on the door, and do many other bad things. After all, the landlord, as they say, is the master. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little when I talk about bad landlords, because there are also normal, adequate landlords from whom you can rent housing for a long time and without any problems, but you should nevertheless take into account such unfavorable situations that people who rent housing face. As for the money issue, in some cases, renting a home is cheaper than taking out a mortgage, but you can rent out a mortgaged apartment and pay off the bank with the money earned that way. So, a mortgage has its pros and cons. And maybe in the future, there will be more pros when banks moderate their appetites a little. But in any case, for the sake of improving your living conditions, it is worth taking out a loan from a bank to buy a home, because a person should live like a human being. 4. A loan to start a business. Often, active and goal-oriented people need startup capital to start and/or develop a business, without which they simply cannot do. Of course, it is good when there are relatives and friends who can simply lend us money if they have it. But unfortunately, not all of us are surrounded by normal, and even wealthy people who are ready to help us with money. Therefore, the only thing left to do is go to the bank and ask it for money to use it to create some kind of business of your own, so as not to work for someone else. This is a sure thing, without a doubt, but very risky, because not every business can go. I know this from my own experience, and if you do not calculate everything properly, you can be left without a business and in debt to the bank, which is not very pleasant. Nevertheless, if you do not try to create this very business, then you will definitely never have it, because if you are afraid of wolves, do not go into the forest. Even a negative experience of starting a business will bring a lot of benefit to a person. At least he will know what and how it works in this or that business he got involved in, and at the same time he will know what not to do when starting this or that business. This experience, believe me, is worth taking a loan for. And a business, if you think it through thoroughly, will definitely pay off the costs, at the very least. In general, startup capital, if it is really necessary, can be obtained from a bank in the form of a loan. I support such an initiative with both hands and feet. I know that if a person is serious, then his business will definitely work out, and the money spent on its creation will not be thrown to the wind. This is much better than, say, buying all these new phones, super powerful computers and very expensive cars, which give a person nothing but stupid show-offs. But your own business is already serious, it is some freedom and, if the business is well organized, quite decent money on which you can live. So, for the creation, as well as for the development of a business, I recommend you take a loan. Do not be afraid to live an active life, it is much more useful than a passive life. 5. Education loan. Investing in yourself, first of all, in your health and your education, is definitely the best kind of investment. With your head on your shoulders, you will never get lost anywhere, rest assured, but your head on your shoulders should not be empty, it should contain knowledge, useful and necessary. Therefore, an education loan is the right loan from all points of view, because this money that you borrow from the bank, you will spend on improving yourself. They will definitely pay off, you can be sure of it. A good education is not some crust that no one needs, it is a smart head, capable of solving various problems. And life throws us a lot of these problems, and you need to be able to solve them, otherwise you will always be on the outskirts of life. If a person is illiterate, he will not be able to live well, this is almost a rule. But a really smart person will almost always occupy the most privileged position in society, he will have enough intelligence for this. So there is something to study for. Of course, there is an opportunity to study for free, but the question is where and what you will study for free. Some things are impossible to learn at the institute at all, for example, no institute will give you a guarantee that it will teach you to create a good and very profitable business or take a cushy government job. Here, You either have to use your own head, or look for people who know what's what, in this or that matter, and can teach you this for a certain fee. You understand that it is not profitable to study for every profession, and our institutes teach, first of all, what is profitable for the state, and not for each of us individually. I have already written in my previous articles about who in this world is really profitable to study for, in order to always be a winner. So do not be lazy to familiarize yourself with my previous materials, for your own benefit. Even those professions that are in demand today may become useless tomorrow, and what will you do with your higher education in that case? Sell jeans at the market. In short, you need to study the right things and in the right places, and this definitely requires money. No one will put valuable knowledge into your head for free and teach you how to use it, because no one needs it. A loan for education, for quality education, is a great benefit for a person. Conclusion. Well, it seems like I have listed all the reasons why people most often take out a loan from a bank. What conclusion can be drawn from all of the above? And the conclusion is this: you can and even should take out a loan, but wisely. Money in our time can solve almost any of our problems, and in the same way, it can satisfy almost any of our desires, of which we have always had a great many. But we usually never have enough of this money itself, so we have to take out loans to improve our lives with their help, so that is why people take out loans, that is why they get into debt. People want to live better, and that says it all. In principle, taking out a loan and making your life better, more interesting, more beautiful, more dignified with its help is certainly right. What questions can there be here, actually? But if a loan makes a person's life worse, because of the person himself, who did not think about the consequences of his actions, then why is this loan needed? You understand, friends, that you can get profit even from sand in the desert. What can we say about a loan? You just need to understand why you are taking it at all.